Are you feeling overwhelmed trying to decide whether to dive into the new GMAT Focus or stick with the classic GMAT format? Well, stress no more, because today we are going to break down the 5 key differences between these two tests and help you make the right choice for your MBA journey. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's quickly set the stage. The GMAT, the parent body administering the test, has announced that the GMAT Focus Edition will come out later this year in 2023. The information we have about the GMAT Focus is from the latest version of the GMAT Official Guide 23-24. Let's look at the new GMAT Focus test structure. Now, if you see, as per the screenshot here, there will be 3 sections of 45 minutes each. Each of these sections will probably equally contribute towards the final score. What we can also see is that the number of questions in the verbal and the quantitative sections have been reduced. The AWA section is not there anymore, and the integrated reasoning section will be repackaged as data insights, which will have the same types of questions that have so far been seen on the IR section. So what we do know now is that the GMAT is going to change, and from what we can see, it is going to be more reflective of the way the current business environment works. We also know that even though the GMAT Focus Edition will be released in some time in 23, the present GMAT will be valid all the way up until early 2024. So test takers will have the option to choose between the GMAT Focus Edition and the current edition until the current edition gets retired sometime early 2024. This, if you ask me, is a little troublesome, because now you have one more decision to make, which is which version of the GMAT do I take? Let's dive into the 5 most important significant differences between the GMAT Focus and the traditional GMAT format. In this video, we are going to be exploring everything from the differences in the test structures and the strategies and what it means to the B school, and most importantly, how do these differences impact you? By the end of this video, you will have a clearer picture of which test is better fit for your skills and goals. Before I get into the differences though, I want to make a very important note here. If you are someone who's preparing for the GMAT already, then do not panic, do not get defocused, do not lose your momentum. Go ahead with your preparation and take the GMAT as soon as practical. Don't use this as a reason to stop your preparation. Remember, the GMAT scores are valid for 5 years. So you have nothing to worry about. If nothing else, GMAT Focus will only give you more options, as I will show you later on in this video. So the first difference is from what is a known existing format versus an unknown new format. From a GMAT prep perspective, if you look at it, there is already enough information available about the questions and the strategies required to do well in the current GMAT format. This has been a test for which we have data going all the way back to 1998, which is when the GMAT moved from the paper-based format to the online computer adaptive format that we now know. We have thousands of questions and many practice exams, including the 6 tests offered by the GMAT. Also, GMAT test prep companies as well as GMAT test takers have put out quite a few test taking strategies and tips and tricks online on forums like GMAT Club. But on the other hand, there is still a great deal of ambiguity whether the GMAT Focus will be similar, what are going to be the differences. We do know the format, but we still need to figure out the scoring scale, how the section scores will add up, how many questions you need to answer to get a particular score, specific test day strategies, the whole shebang, right? Also, since the new edition will have fewer questions, the GMAT will need an algorithm that is far more sensitive. With approximately 20 questions in each section, the algorithm will need to give a fairly accurate scale. Fewer questions might also mean that you will see harder questions in all the 3 sections in the GMAT Focus, because they really want to differentiate in the top end of the spectrum, say the 90th percentile and above. Today in Quant, for example, in the existing version of the GMAT, it's a very crowded space. And if you ask me, there are not going to be a lot of takers for the new GMAT format as soon as it's available. In fact, you will see a spike in the number of people wanting to take the GMAT in its current format. The only people who will be brave enough to take the new GMAT Focus in its early days as soon as it launches is probably test prep instructors like me, right? Because as part of Crackverbal, I've been teaching GMAT for about 2 decades, and I really like to understand this trend. And I understand for most test takers, this is not something that you're comfortable with, right? It's easier to wrap your head around something that has been there for many years than a new format. Correct? I kind of completely understand. And also the GMAT has to ensure there is enough test prep material out there. So all test takers are prepared, from releasing the official guide with practice questions to releasing the new version of the online tests that will stimulate the new GMAT Focus format, right? So all of this has to be done. So test takers would also need to wait for GMAT to make all of this information available. However, if you are someone who feels the current format is not tuned to your strengths and that you have not been able to get the scores that you want, then the new GMAT Focus might help, as it gives you a different format and therefore an opportunity to maybe prepare differently and score better. The second difference is the new GMAT Focus has no AWA and IR. Well, let's start with AWA. In my opinion, this was a smart move. The AWA section lost its importance a long time ago. If you are an executive working on the Wall Street in the 1990s, writing might have been an important skill. But now we live in a ChatGPT world, and perhaps GMAT, and in turn the MBA programs also don't think writing skills matter as much. But there is something interesting about what has happened to IR. So what you can see is in the GMAT Focus Edition, we have 3 sections instead of 4. So AWA and IR have been removed, okay? But now what you have is you have Quant, Verbal and DI, or Data Insights. Now what is this section called Data Insights? DI will have data sufficiency questions, but you'll also see multi-source reasoning, table analysis, graphics interpretation and 2-part analysis. Those of you who are familiar with the integrated reasoning, or IR as we call it in its current format, know that these are all question types that we have seen in IR. The GMAT has a decade's worth of data on IR question because this is something they introduced in 2012. So they have enough intelligence and test taker data to include it as a scoring section, right? Remember, in the current format, IR doesn't count towards your composite 800 score. But in GMAT Focus, in the form of data DI, with 20 questions to be solved in 45 minutes, this will be a section that will go towards your final GMAT score. Now, for someone who feels this is an area that they might do very well in, well, then this is good news for you. But if you are like, someone who doesn't like IR, then perhaps you may not like Data Insights as a section. Right? So this is a section that can potentially play a role in impacting 1/3 of your total scores, right? So that's something that you need to keep in mind. And the third point of difference is that there are fewer topics to prepare on GMAT Focus, no sentence correction, no geometry, right? Well, if there are fewer topics that are getting tested on the new GMAT Focus, that means you have less to study, and there is a logic behind it. To quote what the MBA.com website has about the GMAT Focus Edition, it says it's a more focused test-taking experience that hones in on the higher order critical reasoning and data literacy skills that are more relevant and applicable in the business environment of tomorrow. Now think about it, right? What is required to excel in the business world in the coming decade? We do know that reading is a very important skill. You need to have the ability to quickly figure out the gist and the information that matters. If there is a doubt about a particular detail, you can always go back to the point and figure out where I need to find the required information. This is really what reading comprehension is going to test you on the GMAT. What about critical reasoning? Again, it's a very important real world skill, right? There is so much of data and news coming our way and news is no longer just data, right? It's a lot of opinion. So our ability to figure out what is data, what is opinion, and what are the assumptions, it's a very important skill. And, continuing on that, if some new data is presented to you, you need to be able to analyze whether it will help or hurt your cause. And this is exactly what critical reasoning tests you on. Now let's look at sentence correction. So sentence correction questions expect you to identify an option that will make a sentence grammatically, stylistically, and logically correct. Is that a skill that we need anymore? As I said, maybe AI tools like ChatGPT have reduced the dependence for us to create well-formed sentences. Well, from a GMAT prep perspective, the good news is that most people who are studying for the GMAT will say they are studying for SC, right? Because SC has a lot of theory. CR, RC, not so much, correct? But you need to learn the basics of grammar, understand the subtle semantics of the language, right? And it takes up a bulk of the verbal prep, and this is usually at the start, right? And there is a constant worry that I have to learn all these rules before I start solving questions. And even if you learn all the rules, as you go to a higher difficulty question, you will sometimes know that the rules of grammar themselves aren't so clear anymore. But in CR, right, for example, if you have a logical reason or an explanation for why an answer is right, the answer will look logically right. Whereas in sentence correction, the options can sometimes get into this gray area. But the not so good news is that sentence correction is also a question type which can be done in 90 seconds, right? So you can't do that in CR or RC. So if you are someone who's really good with SC, someone who understands the overall structure of the sentence and is able to apply the rules in a logical manner, then it might work against you because you are letting go a topic that you could have done very well in, right? So what we will notice is that there is also a change in the quant section. The number of questions itself has decreased from 31 to 21. But most importantly, the quant section of GMAT Focus Edition will not have geometry questions. Now, normally one sees about 5 to 6 geometry questions on the GMAT, but there is a lot of prepping required, right, to learn how to tackle. There's a lot of formulas. And maybe GMAT thought that there is not really any real world benefit over here, right? In today's world, arithmetic and algebra are more useful, right? And perhaps GMAT has realized that geometry is not so critical. Similarly, they have realized that a lot of work today involves your ability to understand data, which is what they have introduced in data insight section, right? While retaining some core quantitative skills such as arithmetic and algebra. So again, using the same logic in quant, if you are someone who loves geometry, then of course you would perhaps not want to swap it with any other topic, any other question type. But if not, then this is a welcome change for you. The fourth difference is the new features that you will get in the GMAT Focus. And this new feature is bookmark and edit. Let's take the bookmark feature now. So it allows you to click on a particular question and bookmark it in case you want to come back to that question. But here is the thing, you can change the answer for only 3 questions. You can come back and bookmark as many questions as you want, but only 3 answers can be changed or edited. If you ask me, this is a small change, but it will greatly reduce anxiety in test takers. See, when you take the GMAT, there is a certain sense of anxiety that kicks in because of how the adaptive algorithm is built. You know that the next question is based on the performance of the earlier question. So somewhere you are stressed out because you have to get the questions right and you have to kind of keep moving. You don't have a chance to go back. And I've seen students also stressing, saying that the first initial set of questions, I need to get them right and I get very stressed. Should I mark and move on? And what really happens is we end up spending way too much time or sometimes we may end up second guessing ourselves. So I think bookmarking relieves that stress because you know that you can go back and edit up to 3 answers. And if you see tests like the GRE, the CAT, they have this feature which allows the test takers to go back. So from that perspective, students might feel more comfortable as it's a testing style that they might be familiar with. So that's the good part of the GMAT Focus Edition. But this brings in a new problem. In the new GMAT Focus Edition, you are only allowed to edit 3 answers, right? That means you now have an additional strategy that you'll have to figure out to help you pick those 3 questions. And the final difference is how the admission committees are going to look at it and what are your admission chances. So far we have spoken about how the new GMAT will affect the test takers. But let us see how it will impact your chances of admission to the program of your choice. At this point, GMAT is reaching out to B schools and explaining to them why the new GMAT is actually advantageous, how it reflects the changing scenario in the business world, and why this edition will make it easier for the students to take the test, and how that will result in more applicants to those B schools, and so on. So remember that GMAT has collected a lot of data about each type of question. None of the questions that you are going to encounter in the GMAT Focus Edition will be questions that they have not tested in front of users. They have a lot of data. How long does a person take to solve this question? How many people will probably get it right? What is the next best answer choice that people seem to be giving? They have all of this info. So they are probably not going to create new questions. It will be interesting to see how the algorithm works around this, and the scoring is also probably going to change. Now, the challenge that the B schools will face is that they will not be able to make a comparison between the new and the old format of the test, because the change is not just in what is being tested, that is the topics by themselves, but also how it is being tested. That is the whole GMAT algorithm which is going to be changing, right? And think of it from a MBA admission committee perspective. They know what a candidate with a 740 GMAT looks like, but they still don't know what a score on the new GMAT reflects. So if you're applying this year with the new format, it might be a little hard for the B schools to decipher your score vis-a-vis the others. So as I said before, if you're someone who has started prep using the existing format and are looking to apply to a B school in 2023, then don't worry, just go ahead, stick to the current format. However, if you are someone who is not doing too well, who thinks you can do better at data insights, maybe sentence correction is a problem area for you, or maybe you don't like geometry, right? Then you would probably be better off taking the GMAT Focus Edition, because you would be able to score higher. I suggest that you keep the existing GMAT as plan A and the GMAT Focus as plan B. And one final tip, and that's definitely good news, is that in the current format, in the GMAT Focus, you will be able to select the colleges after you have seen your scores. So far, you had to select the schools before you see the scores, but now they are going to allow you to see it after you get your scores, so you can change the kind of schools that you are applying to. So hopefully that helped you get a good idea about the new GMAT Focus exam, how it is different than the existing format. And in summary, by making GMAT Focus more test taker friendly, the GMAT is really trying to help test takers not just prepare comfortably, but also take the test with confidence, right? And in its new version, the GMAT is a test where there is going to be very little knowledge or prep, and it's going to be largely driven by logic. And this is exactly what we teach here at Crackverbal, to approach the GMAT using logic. And if you look at how we tackle each of the sections, you will realize there is very little theory, but a lot of it is applying logic on GMAT questions. It's about your approach. In case you have any questions about which format is right for you, feel free to let me know in the comments below. As always, please make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you're updated for more such updates on the GMAT and the whole MBA application process.